food is social. We engage a lot together around this thing called food. So let's talk about how do we say the right things and how do we say things that are helpful, not hurtful, unintentionally? How can you understand the why that eating disorder behavior is showing up? And what can I do to be helpful, not hurtful, when the firing of the brain goes that way and the person is scared or the person is unsure what to do in that eating disorder moment where that behavior might show up?
Welcome to your Journey to Joy podcast. I'm your host, Moyra Gorski, and I'm on a mission to help you find joy in the chaos of life. As a retired nurse, multi-passionate entrepreneur, and mom of 4 adult children, I know what it's like to feel the overwhelm of it all and wonder if and when the joy will show up again. And I've learned it's up to us to go find that joy. On this show, you will hear inspiring stories from those who have overcome all kinds of life challenges, tips on how to stay healthy and vibrant during the ups and downs of life, and simple ways on finding joy in your own life. Let's face it, life is messy, yet when we travel together on this journey, support and encourage each other along the way, that joy starts to show up again. I'm so excited to lead you on this journey of you to find the joyful life that you deserve. Well, welcome to another episode of the podcast. I'm your host, Moyra Gorski, and I'm helping you on your journey to joy. It's been a little while since we've talked about eating disorders and eating disorder awareness and treatment and things like that. But today, we're going to talk about it again. I have been introduced to Dr. Krista Crotty, and she is going to, I'm just thrilled that she's here because we're going to have a nice conversation about the type of treatment and the modalities that she's involved with and how they're a little bit different than, even what my daughter was, exposed to the last many years. And some of you who may be listening have been involved with or exposed to and things like that. And just have a nice conversation. Again, always, as I want to on this podcast, provide hope, stories, information so that we can provide hope that people are not alone in their struggles in life, especially if it's an eating disorder here, and that there's hope and there is joy at the end of the tunnel, if you will. So welcome, Dr. Krista. I'm so thrilled that you are here today.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here. I love talking about this. So happy you want to chat.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about what you do. But, I love to start people with how you became so passionate about what you're doing, because again, I know that you're excited about that. We've had some conversations and I know that you love what you do. So how did you find your way to what you are doing today and who you're serving?
I think it found me more than I found it. But that whole idea of calling, how do we land where we land? When you find what you love, you should just stay there, is what I've finally decided. Come to terms with, maybe, is what I should. How did I get here? I got here in various different ways. In school, so I went to school in Southern California. I live in Washington State, so just a point of reference there. I trained in Southern California, loved the schools I went to, thought for sure I would work in neuropsych. I am still, but I didn't ever imagine it to look like this. So trained in neuropsych, birth to 5, early intervention, had some really amazing experiences at big hospitals in the California area. And then I left because California wasn't for me at the time. My family's from the Northwest, so moved back up here. And in my experiences in school, I had the opportunity to work with some individuals with eating disorders and discovered pretty quickly, at least at the time, I can't say if it's still true today necessarily in those institutions, but working with people with eating disorders came with a certain stigma. They were hard, they're resistant, all the things that, you might kind of hear sometimes associated with individuals who suffer from an eating disorder. And I loved it. So I was like, well, it's not really my area of specialty, but I ended up there by happenstance because I didn't feel that way and was curious and intrigued to understand why. As a woman growing up in the 90s, 2000s, we all have pressure to be a certain way. I was an athlete. I had my own pressures. So I got it in some ways from just a piece of that a little bit, especially in California. Moved back to Washington and nobody here was really treating eating disorders. And I was like, well, I have some experience. I'm new in the field. I'm new in Washington. So I just sort of fell into it, sort of naturally. And it was a bit like quicksand. Once I was in, I couldn't get out. And for a while, I think I fought it. I thought I would go back to neuropsych. I thought I would go do neuropsych testing, but really continued to be so inspired by the people I was serving and working with, their brilliance, their thoughtfulness, their integrity, and also just heartbreaking struggle as well. And so I was just perplexed, and it continued to draw me in ultimately. And I'm a reader, I'm a nerd, I like to study. So trying to understand anything I could, get my hands on what I could read at the time. And at the time, just in history where we were in eating disorder development, Walter Kay was publishing a whole bunch of new information about the neurobiology of the brain coming out of University of California, San Diego. He's still there. He's still doing it. He's still amazing. Even though approaching probably the end of his career, maybe, I don't know. He just keeps on going, keeps publishing. So it's amazing. That was just publishing. So it was starting to read it and follow it and be very curious and open to some of those ideas. And so again, I just sort of stayed, is how I ended up here. Fast forward, again, there wasn't a lot of treatment in the Northwest at the time. The Emily program, who's owned by Aconto Health, MOOC, decided they were going to expand into Washington around that same time. So in 2013, I started to work with them, and I opened their facility here in Spokane. I then moved on and opened some of the facilities in the Seattle area. Loved what I learned, loved the exposure to a lot of levels of care. I had some questions about it, but at the same time, it was working, it was effective, it was what was being done at the time. And through that relationship, I was introduced to Dr. Laura Hill, and was really blessed by an opportunity to know her work and know it intimately, and then get to know her. At the time that she was creating and had just started working using what now is TBTS, it used to be called something else, temperament-based treatment with supports. So that's how I fell in with the TBTS people that took Dr. K's work that I'd been reading for years and was like this really fabulous, super interesting research. And Dr. Hill, before she had joined with the rest of her team, had really given it legs to make it clinical. And so it was so amazing to listen to her talk and watch what she was doing. And if you've met Dr. Hill, the thing I'm so inspired, and like if I could just channel a little at Dr. Hill, would be that she learns from her clients so well. So she would present the research and be like, how does it work for you? And they would teach her. So much of this treatment was really developed by the client, taking the research, learning, and Dr. Hill and then her team later really giving that legs. So that's how I got here in a long roundabout way.
Yeah. No, I think it's great. I mean, for one, I've heard of University of San Diego because they have a program there, right?
They do.
Again, we've had if you haven't listened to my podcast, our daughter struggled for many years, upwards to 8 years in and out of treatment. And I think, at least from what I remember at that time, it was for the adolescent. Maybe it still is. Anyway, so it wasn't, Anna had aged out of it or whatever, but I got introduced to some people that had their children there. And I know why we got along so quickly is because I'm the same way. Like I think I shared this with you, but I had a cancer diagnosis beginning of October. And so I have been digging in as well and learning. And I just recently, again, a little sidelight, but I just recently had some extensive blood work done through Function Health, which is Dr. Mark Hyman. It's his beta program of functional, blood testing. And I just got my second round of blood results. And that's what I was looking at this morning, because I was looking at, like, I have some concern about my heart and like cholesterol and some other things that I didn't even think of, but I'm like inspired. I'm like, okay, but I have family history of cardiac. My grandfather died at his desk in his 50s. My uncle went hunting, early in his life, and came back and didn't feel well, had a heart attack. So I'm like, okay, well, I know I'm concerned about the cancer stuff. I've got some immune stuff that's down. That's, I'm not surprised by that, but I saw this. I'm like, okay. And so for me, I'm like, okay, give me the stuff, and then I'm going to work on how to improve it and learn from that. The same thing. That's what I love about what you've done, is that you've learned, and then you've worked, and then you've learned. And just at the end, what you said about Dr. Laura Hill and you is like, you're learning from your patients. And with having a daughter that's gone, I went through my own eating disorder, so I have a little bit that I didn't go through treatment and things like that. I went and saw a therapist for a while and got myself straightened out, if you will. But my daughter has gone through so much, and she's brilliant.
Yeah.
And I'm biased, but she is brilliant. But most, eating disorder patients are these type A,
Brilliant.
high
Brilliant.
achiever, brilliant
Yeah.
people. And I believe she could create her own
Mhm.
program, and she'd love to
Absolutely.
figure out how she can give back. But the fact that you guys are looking at, and Dr. Laura Hill looked at and talked to her clients and said, hey, is this working? And what else can we do? What can we do differently? It's so good, because I think with many things, if we just put people in this cookie cutter, like, okay, and again, I'm the retired nurse who looked at a care plan that said, okay, you have a spinal cord injury. I worked rehab nursing. You have this. So you're going to be on this bowel program and you're going to have this activity level. Like, you're going to be put into this care plan. Okay, you have anorexic. This is what we're going to do. Bulimia, this is what we're going to do. It doesn't, everybody's different. We need to have personalized care, but how can you do that in such a large setting? It's so prevalent, and these people are coming in and out. Like, how can you do it? So the fact
Mhm.
that you guys are starting to look at that and you're working with
Mhm.
seems like a little personalizing the care as
Mhm.
opposed to cookie cutter. I think it's brilliant, and it offers a lot of hope.
Yeah. Yeah. And just even as you're saying that, so we ran a week in January was the last week we ran. We ran another one, and we will have another one coming in March. But there was a woman that was in the group that participated in care. And yeah, we have a frame. Like, we definitely are going to tell you, like, here's our frame, and we're going to like figure out where people fit in the frame, kind of. Like, we don't really know, but we're going to teach you a whole bunch of things. But we were working on this document, and she was really frustrated with it. I was like, okay, let's figure it out for you. And so I sat down and created a brand new document for her and have sent it out to her, and other people now have used it. But she said to me, I'm like, I said as the clinician, here's what I hear you saying, I think maybe let's try it this way. Why don't you try it on? Come back to me and tell me how to fix it, because I don't know if it's right or wrong. And she came back the next day in treatment, and she was like, okay, it worked here and it didn't work here. So could you add this? And so we reworked it, and I sent it back out to her. And just last week, she emailed me again and was like, hi, Dr. Crotty. Any chance I could get another copy of that? Because it's actually been really helpful. But it wasn't unless I would have stopped and listened to her that we would have even created the document that we made for her. Maybe other people will use it too, or maybe not. And like, that's the learning of TBTS is she took her traits, she took what we were doing, she gave me feedback, I listened, and then we worked together to create this thing that now she's using with her home treatment team. I think somewhere in the Midwest, working in with that therapist. So I
Mm-hmm.
just think it's so cool because we get to be collegial, learn from the expert who's you, and also provide the knowledge that maybe I carry from Dr. K and like his research and all the research and practice I've had with other clients. But it's still, I'm always learning. Like, I don't
Mm-hmm.
know it all. I know this much, but there's so much we learn every single time we
Yeah.
interact with
Yeah.
our clients because we go digging and go to our understanding and
Yeah. I mean,
make
this
it.
just kind of came up in my head. Like, are there certain traits that you see that all the eating disorder patients have that, um, and maybe talk about those and how they can be beneficial, or maybe their worst enemy, or
Mhm.
maybe some of those traits that people don't. I don't know. I'm just talking off the cuff. There's what's coming in my head. Those traits that maybe people don't even pay attention to that we should be paying attention to, that can help them if we tweak those or pay attention
Yeah,
to those, that it could really help them. Does that make
sure.
sense?
No, definitely makes sense. Yeah, and the answer is yes. And the answer is no. It's both. But the yes part of are there certain traits that most people maybe exhibit that have an eating disorder? Well, yes, different constellations of a long list of traits. So the researchers, Walter Kay and his team, so Dr. Laura Hill, Dr. Stephanie Natz-Peck, Dr. Christina Rodinga, are the three primary authors of TBTS, and they have, in working with other researchers and other research bodies, have collected and create from the research a list of 54 traits that we pull from. So that's a lot of traits that not
Hmm.
everybody who has, let's just use the diagnosis of anorexia, has. Are there some that more consistently people with the restrictive type of anorexia exhibit? Yeah, more commonly. Does that mean that it's always the same profile? No, it's not. But traits, temperament is biological. So it's that good old saying, the apple doesn't fall very far from the tree. I mean, if you think about your daughter, you probably notice some of the same traits that you have that maybe when she was ill or really struggling with her illness were definitely destructive to her. But you could see how they could be productive because you were using the same trait differently in a productive way to be successful as a nurse at the time that you were nursing or in your current work or whatever you're doing. With her now, not knowing much about where she's at, you can maybe see how that same trait that was the part of what kept her in her illness or engaging in eating disorder symptoms, whatever her symptom set was those same traits were keeping her in an illness can also now be a significant component of her success in recovery or in life or whatever she's up to. Again, not knowing where she is on her journey. But so the quick and easy one, because most people will resonate with it, and from a cultural standpoint, we resonate with it, would be like perfectionism. So perfectionism, for people who have perfectionism, you can't imagine people who don't have perfectionism. Doesn't everybody have perfectionism? The answer is no, not everybody does, right? But perfectionism is a very, very common trait among individuals with anorexia. It's also a really common trait among many of like our most successful CEOs or our surgeons, etc. Same trait exhibited differently, right? So the trait is neither good nor bad. It's the trait expression that is problematic, good or bad, ultimately. And I don't really like the word bad, but so we in the TBTS language use productive and destructive because if it's bad, that would inherently mean we want to get rid of it. And we don't actually. I would say, and maybe you would align with perfectionism. My perfectionism is highly effective for me because it got me here today on time. It keeps me in managing my program. It helps me in my life with as a mom or whatever, right? If I didn't have that, I don't know where I'd be. But if it was destructive and I had an eating disorder, it also maybe could be the thing that keeps me measuring my food or keeps me in a place of engagement in my eating disorders, only eating certain things or whatever the symptom set might be. Same perfectionism, same trait, that's biological. I could tell you that my dad is highly perfectionistic as he was a CEO. I could tell my grandfather, who was an Air Force pilot, highly perfectionistic. My grandma, like I could go all the way up the family tree. It's genetic. So if I'm the patient and the therapist says, well, we've got to get rid of that perfectionism, that's the problem. You're asking me to take away part of me. That's who I am, like part of what makes me me. We just need to shift the expression. So we get away from that good, bad. So yes, there's a really common profile. We talk about the expression of that trait.
It's so good. So good.
So it's
well,
really
and I want people
to
right. Well, and I want people to hear that because what I heard years ago when our daughter was diagnosed, when they said that there's a genetic component, I was like, great. Like that means that I caused this, right?
Yeah.
But so what you said is I didn't cause it, but again, there are familiar traits, behaviors and things like that. And I completely see it now. You know, I gave her some, right? And her dad gave her some. And, you know, perfectionism is definitely even with her, and she's upstairs right now. She's in a really great place in her life and moving forward and couldn't be more thrilled. And when you said that, I thought about, yes, the perfectionism and anything that she was doing, yes, destructive. There was plenty of that. But for instance, now she's working on what she loves to do is social media stuff. And so she's done some things for me. She helped a friend of mine who was a podcast guest, and she created a set of dolls around STEM and STEAM, you know, that whole thing. And so before they launched, she needed somebody to do some social media and some reels and take the dolls and do all these things. I watched her in my kitchen going, you know, she's trying to like edit these. I was like, it's good. It's good. She goes, no, it needs a little, like, I need to just cut it. So that's where, and she created brilliant videos. So it's the same type of thing. And she often would get frustrated with her dad, who seems to have very similar tendencies to her. But she's like, yeah, but he's doing this. And he's, you know, she looked at some of his behaviors as destructive, which Perhaps they are, but I said he also has many of those traits that have made him, again, he's the CEO of his company. He stepped in and he grew it from his father, took it over from his father. I said he stays on time. He's so organized. Like those traits are, yes,
Super
perhaps there's
important.
just, yeah, but they're super important to him. And he's found, as I would always say to her, he's found a way to use those to find success. And so
Right.
I love the way you said it. We don't want to use that they're bad or good. We just want to
Mhm.
express them differently.
Because we can, and over the continuum of life, right, or the timeline of life, however long that is, you could probably look back at your own, or your husband could, or even she might be able to even look at the ways in which they express differently based on the relationships we're in, our stress level, what's going on in our environment, and maybe that during the course of an illness, the illness of an eating disorder, they're hijacked into, trait expression that's destructive. So I find that to be really helpful. And it is genetic, it is neurobiological. There's no fault. But what's cool about that, like just as when you were talking about your daughter's experience, like you, when she was in her care and her treatment, you could see some similar traits. And so that's what's amazing about the support piece of TBTS is that you, mom, who maybe has that same trait as your loved one, can say, well, this is how I express that. Like, could you try on the same trait a little differently? Because sometimes when we're in negative trait or destructive trait expression, it's so ingrained in that that's how we do it that it's hard to see an alternative or to see something different or to try it on. Even just to shift it a tiny little bit in a more productive way can oftentimes be so helpful when we bring supports in because it is genetic. So there's someone who's like, I actually get that. Like, I'm kind of like that too. And this is how it shows up for me good in a helpful way and not so helpful way, productive, destructive. So,
Yeah.
that,
Well, and I think that one of, again, Anna's last treatment stay, two of the things that I think were instrumental in her being, being able to stay out of treatment, if you will, and really get catapulted into good recovery was ketamine.
Mhm.
But also within that ketamine treatment, and I've had a few episodes about that, was her brilliant therapist who brought the family in.
Yeah.
And albeit it would have been nice to be in session a little bit more, well, at least with what I say that with like the kids,
Yeah.
our three boys, but my husband and I met with a therapist a few times, maybe three,
Mhm.
4 times
Mhm.
before we even had Anna come in, so she could get to know, again, like you're saying, kind of our traits, get to know us, our family dynamic, the way that we saw things, the way that we would discipline and raise our kids and stuff like that. Then brought her in, had
Mhm.
some time together, and then brought the kids in. And albeit, like I said, I wish that they had been able to be in there a little bit more. That one time in particular, like I'm
Mhm.
going to talk about you, Paul, my oldest son. The one time in particular was so helpful in helping our oldest son, and even all of our boys, really. But I'll tell an example of that with our oldest is really help them understand and see Anna with this, neutral third party in there going, okay, just listen to her, and then we'll listen to you too. And so we could all kind of talk about it and hear each other,
Mhm.
and kind of again understand a little bit more what she was going through, but that it wasn't just her and her separate disease and disorder and stuff like that. It was kind of like, again, like you said, I could say, oh, I understand that. One of my sons I could understand that. Like, and again, the case in point with our oldest son, he had kind of said, you know what, I don't really want to talk to you anymore. And that was so hurtful for Anna, but it was so difficult for him to be close to her and in touch with her. And then and he loves her so much. And then she would be okay. And then she wasn't. And then it was back into treatment. And he said, that was his way of coping. He's like, basically like, I'll talk to you when you're recovered, which was really kind of harsh. But again, both sides of the story, like that was the best thing for him. But
Right.
we did one of these family sessions,
Mhm.
and it was right before, or we did one of these family sessions. Then we were able to have her, she was in treatment. We were able to have her kind of Zoom in for Thanksgiving.
Oh
And,
yeah.
and so we were all here, and then she was in
Yeah.
Denver and on the Zoom and stuff like that. And, she was laughing. We were interacting. It was wonderful. And then the next week, my oldest son reached out to her and said, and wished her a happy birthday because her birthday's right after Thanksgiving. He said, happy birthday. First text in probably 2 years, and said, you know what? We don't have to talk about it all now, but I just want to wish you a happy birthday. And, I think basically he was saying, I'm okay of us talking again. Because it was that idea of just what you said in the long-winded way of me saying, like, it wasn't because for so long it was like Anna she went to treatment, Anna and her disorder, it was just all, but we all need to like get in the room and get around the table and listen to each other and hear each other, like, and just so that we can understand, right? Seek first to understand before we start judging. And so again, I love that you get the support people and the caregivers involved in your treatment because it's so important.
And that's part of why TBTS, I think one of the questions you'd asked me when we were chatting earlier was, where does this come from? Like, why was it created? And the authors would say it was created because one, the lethality of eating disorders, just from a statistical perspective, is unfortunately high. Anorexia being the most lethal of the family of eating disorders, right? And constantly and consistently hearing just that it was so-and-so and their disorder, so-and-so and their disorder. But the reality of it is, like, we're tribal, right? So we live with our people live with us. So why do we leave the family outside of the room or the partner outside of the room or whoever outside of the room? So, TBTS wasn't designed not to say, and there's in the US, especially all this like competition of better and best, it's not a better or best, it's an augmentation, it's an add to the things that a person might still be going to do in their therapy. But this therapy really offers not family therapy, like let's process every, misstep that has occurred in history, but rather how do we come together to everybody learn the psychoeducation, everybody really understand this illness in the same way if a loved one had diabetes, right? You would all learn how to manage the diabetic diet or the diabetic insulin or the diabetic, whatever that person needs for success with living with diabetes. No big deal, right? But we don't do that. Yet this illness is one that food is social. We engage a lot together around this thing called food. So let's talk about how do we say the right things and how do we say things that are helpful, not hurtful, unintentionally? How can you understand the why that eating disorder behavior is showing up? And what can I do to be helpful, not hurtful, when the firing of the brain goes that way and the person is scared or the person is unsure what to do in that eating disorder moment where that behavior might show up? So the amazing thing is that you all get the same level of information, and then you get to learn from your loved one of what it looks like for them. Because I have a list of traits, I have some understanding of neurobiology, but we can give you the textbook, but people are still people. So we're not all perfect textbook stories. So then the expert is in the room, the expert is the carrier. And so they get to then take that information and say, yes, this is true for me, and no, that's not true for me there. Both and. And then the family gets to learn, like, how do we just enjoy Thanksgiving dinner and laugh together? And how do I like stand in your presence and like help you when it's not a time of laughter, but it's a time of struggle? But I can stand there in a way that's helpful to you and not hurtful to you. So I think that's the really cool, powerful thing. And that's what we hear over and over again when clients come through, parents, partners, siblings, whoever the people are, like, I finally just like understand the illness. I understand like what's not working and why we need to do it this way and not that way. But I didn't know that happened that way for them, but it does. So I can shift too. So I think it's so powerful.
Brought to you by Gorski Wellness and the possibility of a better you. Are you feeling sluggish? Ready for a change? Need more energy? Up for a bigger challenge? I'm Moyra Gorski, retired nurse and wellness advocate. For over 22 years, I've been helping people live healthier lives while making small changes each and every day. Those small changes lead my clients to living a healthier lifestyle with markedly better health. As a brand ambassador for the Shaklee Corporation, the most clinically proven wellness company in the world, I guide my clients to make healthier choices each day with their food, supplements, skincare, workouts, and mindset. They say getting started is half the battle. Let's make healthy happen together. If you're ready for simple, natural, sustainable solutions to feeling and looking your best, let's connect. You'll find a link in the show notes or reach out to me at moyragorski.com. Here's to a better you. And I've felt it in this home, not the hostility of like, you're just so, you're deceiving mom. You're just not listening to her. You're doing all this, you're doing all this. And like all of this, there's been a lot of anger and hurtful statements and things like that. Seeing my daughter just want to explain herself, but also, and for others to hear her, and to love her and stuff like that is what she needed. But, I can see doing it this way is, again, it can just kind of soften things up and get people to just, again, get to that understanding, point and have a better, and again, the fact that, it's a malnourished brain just can't reason and can't think and be logical and all of those things. And eating disorders just don't make sense, right? So we sit there and try to logically figure them out. It's not going to work.
Yeah. And I think that's what's the nice part about the psychoeducation component of TBTS is that we do actually know a lot, but we don't know a lot that has been passed on to clients even, and or their supports. So helping people understand in the same way, like I'll use diabetes again, the pancreas isn't working. But if I just said, do these things, but never explain the illness, it makes it harder. So if we can understand what's not working, then there's more empathy, there's more understanding, there's more support of why a person's behaviors when they are engaging in those eating disorder behaviors, the negative behaviors, are so chaotic, aren't understandable, feel so foreign to a person without an eating disorder. But once you understand the why the brain has fired that way or what's going on, it's like, aha, it's not being obstinate. It's not being malicious. It's this part of the brain is just not doing what we want it to do yet. So
right.
There's a lot of power.
Yeah. And I just, again, it's just everything is, the world is an interesting place, again, with my diagnosis and the fact that I have changed my diet and I've changed what I've eating, and my daughter lives in my home.
Yeah.
Before, when she was kind of much more in her disorder, if I was changing what I was eating or, she was just always like watching and stuff like that and made comments and, oh, mom, what are you doing this? And whatever, we don't have to talk about all those details. But the fact is now I have cancer. I don't have cancer. It's gone, but I had cancer. I had a diagnosis. They took it out, but I want to work on decreasing my chances of reoccurrence. And so because of that, I've changed my diet. I've done some things and I don't feel that angst from her. Before I would feel this angst, like I'm trying to, have a nice big salad with like, blah, blah, blah. Then she'd be like, that's all you're eating? Now it's kind of like, I've heard her say it to me, Mom, whatever you need to do, because you need to follow along the path that's going to keep you healthy and cancer-free. And so she's accepting of that, which, and again, she can understand that. My husband understands that when I make tacos for him, beef tacos, and I saute some mushrooms and black beans and all these salsa, and that's what I use. He's like, yeah, whatever. As long as he can eat the stuff that he wants, as long as I make him that, it's happy. So again, it's that understanding piece can make things so much, not better, but again, there's just that understanding piece. And so people can just come to a acceptance of that. And I've seen that again within our own household here.
Yeah. And I think that's part, it's just this like place of understanding of, for some people, tons and tons and tons of flexibility will be helpful. So for some people, it won't be. So, and that's not, that's going to be on a continuum of traits. It's going to be on a continuum of whatever, what I need and what is unique to me and what you need is unique to you. But some of that, when we're a family, we are going to see some overlap, maybe. But how do we want to talk about it? Like, you've learned a lot from your daughter's recovery. You've shifted. your own understanding and your own communication patterns intentionally because of
Hmm.
treatment, maybe, and unintentionally because the environment shifted the expression of your own traits, your husband's traits, your kids, whoever else is in the home, your daughter.
Hmm.
It all shifts. And that's that amazing rewiring in the brain as she's gone on her journey, wherever she is in it. That's the rewiring of the brain. It's the
Hmm.
shifting. It's there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's really.
And again, I think people can, within eating disorders, can do that. Again, it's also that awareness, like, again, talking about my oldest, who
Mhm.
you shared with us a couple of weeks ago, he got like nominated to be the top operations person for the year, and he lost out to another woman, but
Oh,
he was top, but that's who he is. He's
mhm.
like, see a goal, get a goal. So that's great. But he said, my boss is also talking to me about taking some time off. Like, I really need to have some more PTO and stuff like that. And I go, well, yeah, you should, Paul. And he's like, yeah, but who raised me? I'm like, I understand. Like, your father and I raised you, and we're again, we get it done, we get shit done. But again, let's learn from that, right? That's in your late 20s. I don't want you to start this or continue on or, solidify this pattern of like work, work, work and miss life, because
Right.
we're wiser now when we're 60 and we can look back and say, yeah, it was great, but I want you to learn from here so that you don't create this pattern of overworking and missing out on life if you're considering being a father and like you just got married and all those kind of things.
Hmm.
So we can all learn from,
Hmm.
again, learn
Yeah.
from those things. It doesn't have to be, again, just from the anorexic, but just, with our other children as
Yeah.
well.
All the
Yeah.
people around us, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Any, I don't know if this is, but a lot of times I'll ask people if they just had a particular case that they worked with or somebody that they worked with that was kind of just a cool like way to say, hey, this is how, these
Yeah.
are the things that really worked with them, or, anything that you want to
Sure.
share or...
There's so many amazing stories. Yeah, I think, so TBTS was initially the first iteration, I guess, the longest in available, is for severe and enduring anorexia. So adults, severe and enduring anorexia, which is a really, sadly a presentation that we see frequently, meaning it's been around for a while and kind of treatment resistant-ish. People have tried different things that haven't worked, so they're frustrated, they're sad, whatever is really common. So Brain-Based Therapy Northwest does both adults and teens. So we have two different programs. The adult program ran in January. The adolescent program will run for the first time in June. But the cool thing about the January week, just using that as an example, the presentation of the clients were varied in ages. So we had varied lengths of illness as far as like the length of time in which people had been struggling, and even diagnostically, they were similar yet different. And listening to each one of the four, like in that group, so the TBTS weeks are very small because we want to individualize it. We want to make sure that clients that come in and their supports get 100% of our attention for the 5 days they're with us. So of the four, three of them had done all the things. They had gone to residential, they had gone to partial hospitalization, they had gone to intensive outpatient, they had done outpatient, and some of them had done them multiple times. One woman had been struggling for eating disorder for more than 30 years. Another had been struggling for like 5 to 10. So long course of illness. And I think listening, especially to the woman who'd been there, had an eating disorder for 30 plus years and had brought her adult daughter as one of her supports, the coolest thing was watching her realize that one, she didn't, it wasn't necessarily, we would never were in a place of saying, you're wrong. We simply were in a place of saying, how can we do it differently? Right. So for her, she left. And at the end, she said, I've done a lot of treatments. I've done residential. I've done all the things, various lengths of time. She said, her last thing is she like gave me a hug goodbye. She said, I've never felt hope when I've
Hmm.
left treatment because I just felt like I was now gonna like have to like white knuckle do the things. But now what I know is that I have a plan. I've told the people in my life, she told her husband, she told her daughter, she told the people, this is what I need from you. And these are like the small steps I'm going to take. And we had practiced them and practiced them and practiced them all week. We'd practice asking for help. We'd practice specifically asking for help for her traits. And it was really interesting for me watching her feel like, one, I have hope. Two, I can do this. Because we were in a place of not saying we're going to take away your traits. She was an amazing woman, was doing really cool things in the workforce, doing really cool things as a helper. Her industry was in the helping industries, changing the lives of teens. And she had this very debilitating illness that was unfortunately causing really severe medical complications. But for her to say, I know I can do this much for the next 10 days, and then I can do this much for the next 10 days. But stories like that it's this place of a hope, and that they were the expert in treatment, so that they took their traits. They talked about their illness. They talked about the science that we give them, this little light bulbs going on of like, I get that now. I do that. And I understand why I do that. And now I know how to ask for help when that behavior, eating disorder behavior comes up, or when that thought pattern comes up for me. I know what to do and why it's happening. And it's not just like I screwed up because I thought this way or I engaged in this eating disorder behavior, but rather I understand the science and I have a plan based on who I am and the traits I carry to try to do something different. And it's not about right and wrong, fault or blame. It's just like, let's try it on. And she's able to say, and another fun part of what she said, she's like, I know it's going to be really, really itchy, but all itches go away eventually. So
That's like, awesome. I love that.
I love that. And I mean, she works with teens. She's like, so I get it. Like sometimes you just like, and she's like, it'll go away eventually. And that might take a long time. But I just was inspired because she had done treatment so many times and felt like she would just die of this eventually. She felt like she would die of this.
Yeah. And that's, again, in the beginning of the podcast, what we said, like if we can provide hope, if somebody can feel that hope, then that's the first step. And just that fact that it's not an overnight thing, a week long, but the fact that she has the tools and that it's, again, it'll continue to itch, but it'll subside over time. It's that consistency, because I've seen it with my daughter. I've seen it certainly with some of my clients that I work with as they're trying to make changes in their health and whatnot. It just takes those little steps. The little steps are really the big things, right? The little consistent steps are really the big things over time. So that's an awesome story. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that.
It was super fun. Amazing. Like I said, I mean, we get to treat, while I'm in the field, I get to treat amazing humans that are doing amazing things. And
I remember the first place that our daughter was at just here locally, just as a kind of a stopgap, if you will. And I remember a mom sitting there on the couch, and she was talking about this has been going on for like 10 years or something like that, or I don't know, something, or she was going to her 10th trip. And I was like, how does that happen? Like, that is never going to happen. Well, fast forward, like I couldn't even tell you how many treatment places our daughter was in. So it's because when people may have heard like 30 years, people can struggle for a very, very long time. And again, if you've listened to any of my podcast episodes, those that are listening now, many of those people that I interviewed had long-standing, things that they hid, disorders that they hid from others. People didn't know and things like that. So it can go on. But again, the fact that you can help to provide them some hope is really, that's all we want in life.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the great things about TBTS is that we provide them with, we don't tell them what skills they're going to use, but we have skills that align with the traits that commonly people who have experienced that trait, who have that neurobiological wiring, that trait shows up for them in productive or destructive expressions, also have a skill that commonly has worked. Is it perfect? Not for everybody, but we can try it on because it's worked for others. Maybe it'll work for you. Maybe we have to tweak it. But there's a plan for that versus it just being kind of the wet spaghetti approach. Throw it all at them and see what sticks. It's like, well, we know this about you, so let's try this, because kind of in a Lego fashion, they might fit together. We don't know for sure. They might. We could try it. So there's a tool associated, and you get to do it with your people. So which is really scary for some people, but it also is like hopeful because you're not alone. So there's that hope, like, okay, I can have these hard conversations in this safe environment about how to get help, not just from my therapist, but from my brother or my partner or my spouse or my dad, mom, friend. I don't know. So anybody can be a support. We call them supports. We don't call them carers. We don't call them caregivers. We call them supports because they really are a support. And supports can look a lot of different ways.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. And it's again, so helpful. As I've said so many times, I realized that I didn't ask for help so many years of my life, but now it's like, that's what I call it. It's just support. Like I need a little more support today. So I'm going to go get a hug from my daughter, or I'm going to go take a walk with my dog, or I'm going to call a friend, or I'm going to go take a bath or do a yoga nidra before I go to bed. It's just about supporting ourselves, supporting each other kind of thing.
And where you are in that moment. I mean, that's the thing, like we are all in different places all the time. So what do you need right now is still part of your neurobiology. So understanding your neurobiology helps you understand what you might need when you are having that expression of whatever's going on.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Great conversation. Love this. I knew I would. And I know my listeners will too. Tell everybody where they can find you if they want some more information about your program and you, and to get in touch.
Yeah. Absolutely. I love to talk to anybody, as you can tell, about brain-based stuff. So you can find me online. So my website is Brain-Based Therapy Northwest, but it's just the N and the W for Northwest because we are up here in the Pacific Northwest. So that's my website. You can find me there. On the website, there's a link we offer two just like free, myself and another primary provider sit and just kind of hang out for an hour on Tuesday afternoons and Sunday mornings. It's like a provider, a parent, a client, anybody can pop in and just it's like open-ended Q&A with us or chat about whatever. You can find any of that. And then you can find us online, Facebook, Instagram, and then me on LinkedIn, Krista Crotty at LinkedIn, and then Brain-Based Therapy for both Facebook and Instagram. You can find us there. So lots of different places online. And then you want to read the book's available on Amazon that was written by Dr. Hill and her colleagues. So.
And tell us that book again too.
That book is Temperament-Based Therapy with Support for Anorexia Nervosa, and it's written by Dr. Laura Hill, Stephanie Natz-Peck, and Christina Waringa.
Okay, yeah, I'll put that in the show notes too. Yeah. So, thank you, Krista. This was awesome to have this conversation. Really, again, I'm grateful that we're so much farther along the path and kind of out of it. It's never over, but so much more over here than we were before. But I know that all of this information is so helpful for those listening, for those that have people that in their lives that are struggling. It's just, again, if we can understand things, then we can, we just have better when we can more deeply understand things. So any last words that you'd like to say to the audience before we close up?
Well, we can use the same analogy. Things are itchy, but the itches do stop scratching eventually. I just think there's so much hope in TBTS because the brain is always wiring and rewiring. So we can change our behaviors, good behaviors, bad behaviors become good. Trait expressions, there's no such thing as a bad trait. It's an expression. So we just have to rewire. So keep rewiring your brain. We're always growing no matter how old you are. So yeah,
that's right. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. And thanks for being here. Again, thank you, my audience, for listening and sharing. This week, I got a beautiful note from somebody who found such value in this podcast. And I feel like I'm small but mighty. So again, if we can provide a couple of people hope after today, then I believe we've done our job. So thanks again. Thanks for listening. And we'll catch you next time.
Thank you.
Hey there, ready to live a more joyful life? Considering connecting with someone who can help you? If so, I'd like to be that person. I offer a free consultation where we determine where the chaos is in your life and how you can learn to bring more joy each and every day. Visit my website, moyragorski.com, or simply email me, moyra@moyragorski.com, with more joy in the subject line. I look forward to connecting, and I'm here to say there will always be some chaos, which requires a little juggling, but you can find joy and live your life intentionally filled with that joy. Let me help you on your journey to joy. And that's joy, the journey of you.